Hello, welcome to Radio Row at Super Bowl 56. This is Roy Kessel and Caleb Radham with the Sports Philanthropy Network, and we're excited to have with us a special guest today, Dr. Chris Nowinski. Chris is one of the foremost authorities on concussions in sports and studying CTE and getting all of the families involved and work around the brain and the trauma that happens both for the individuals and the families. So, Chris, welcome to today's show.
Thanks for having me, Roy.
We're excited to have this conversation. I know it's a difficult conversation, and you've done an amazing job building up the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Tell us a little bit about your background and what prompted you to get into this fight.
Sure. So I'm a Chicagoan like you, was lucky to be recruited to play football at Harvard and got through fine. Then I went into the WWE and I got too many concussions and had to retire from post-concussion syndrome back in 2003. And at that time, we didn't talk about concussions. And as I was trying to get back healthy so I get back to work, I met Dr. Robert Cantu, who opened up my eyes to the fact that concussions were a much bigger thing than we realized. And that had I, rested my concussions, recognized them, that I might not be in the horrible state I was in with post-concussion syndrome. And at that point, I sort of made a decision that I would try to change the culture around concussion so that athletes don't throw away their health like I did. And things happened, and here we are. So it started with a book, and then the foundation, then partnering with Boston University to build this brain bank. And, to almost 20 years later now, and now we're talking about concussions and CT on Radio Row every year.
It's been interesting to follow the progress of the concussion story. I know I first got involved with it about 2010, and we had done a report to look at how many concussions teams were reporting in the NFL, and we looked at like the last 3 years of data. And at that point, there were still teams that reported 0 concussions for the year.
Yep.
Total concussions, and there were very few teams that reported more than 3 concussions for an entire season, including preseason practices, everything, and it's just crazy. So I give you a lot of credit for bringing this issue to the forefront, and the awareness has certainly skyrocketed, but I know we still have a long way to go. What do you see as the current challenges in the environment now?
Yeah, so the State of the Union on this issue is that everyone understands concussions. Everyone's got protocols. The NFL's protocol gets better every year because we still make mistakes. But so the concussion issue is mostly covered for pro athletes in college. Kids still don't understand what it is and never will because they're too young. And so we have a real fight to keep kids safe in sports. But the CT issue is where there's been the most growth. So when we started, there were only 48 cases of the disease ever known worldwide that were proven through studying the brain. We have built a brain bank up of 1,250 brains since then, 315 NFL players. We've seen it 16 out of our first 65 high school football players. We got the first cases of ice hockey, baseball, mixed martial arts. We've seen it military veterans. CT is huge. That's what we've learned over the last 15 years is it's everywhere. It's everywhere you'd think it would be. It's way, way more frequent in football than we'd like it to be. It's way more frequent ice hockey, all these things. But we still can't diagnose it. We still can't treat it in a way that'll stop the disease, so we're just treating symptoms. And families are still struggling, and we're still losing people in the prime of their lives from the mental health things that come with it. So I'm proud of how much we've accomplished, but it also has shown us how far we have to go.
So I'm going to make this super, super simple, Dr. Nowinski. I'm a parent. I have kids who play sports. My kid gets a dinger. As a parent, do I automatically go running on the field, grab my kid and say, my baby, come here, let me take care of you? Do I let the coach handle it? Do I leave it up to the refs? Based on what you're seeing, what's the best way for parents to sort of step in and find the right way to handle this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you think your child has a concussion on the field, it all depends on what happens next on what you should do. If nobody seems to know and they don't stop the game and take your kid off the field, yes, absolutely just walk onto the field, stop the game, and take your kid off the field. Because children die every year from taking additional hits to the head after concussion from second impact syndrome. And the longer you stay on the field after a concussion, the longer your recovery is going to be, because you're putting damage upon damage. So, and I would have no problem with that as a parent myself. Coaches are better trained than they used to be, but the reality is most coaches are not trained on concussions. They are watching the game. They're not paying attention to what happens after your kid falls down if the ball goes somewhere else. And then your child probably doesn't have an athletic trainer to be your advocate. So you have to be the advocate for your kid. And there's nothing wrong with walking onto the field and taking your kid off if they have a brain injury and no one is protecting them.
I think one of the big issues that happens, you talk about changing the culture with the athletes. So when you get high profile sports, major college, NFL, other pro sports, the mentality of the athlete is, I got to stay in the game at all costs. I don't want to leave, right? So unless you take their helmet away on the sidelines, they're going to go back in the game. And we've seen certainly some high profile fails. And I know you're very outspoken on Twitter when we see things that are going on during the game. How do we get that culture to really change so that the athletes want to take care of themselves with that long-term perspective in mind?
So we're always going to fight that culture. So there's two problems with self-reporting concussions. One is that you feel obligated to play, and two, you're not in a good state of mind to recognize your injury. The thing that recognizes you're injured is injured. You just got a big burst of adrenaline because you were at a traumatic event that caused the energy that went to your brain that was enough to cause the injury. And so you're ready to just go fight, and keep going. And so we've actually changed how we talk about concussion education at the Concussion Legacy Foundation. We've shifted over to, instead of leading with, you got to take yourself out, when in doubt, sit out. Because even I didn't do that when I had, my wife made me quit basketball because I kept playing a basketball game when I knew I had a concussion, because I didn't want the guys to have to go 4-on-4 in my mid-30s. I mean, it's like, how insane can you be? It's hard. So we instead have this program called Team Up, Speak Up, where we work with teams to have their coaches and their captains talk to the team about how important it is for you to look out for your teammates with concussions, because they won't always recognize it. And if your teammate's acting weird in the huddle or on the sideline or whatever it is, and you think they've taken a blow to the head, it's your job to speak up and look out for them. And that's been very successful. And we've had, the National Federation of High School Athletic Associations, USA Lacrosse, USA Rugby, all our USA Hockey, they've all done Team Up Speak Up Week. So go to teamupspeakup.org if your kid isn't doing this yet. Sign them up.
I think the challenge, and you pointed it out, is that peer pressure, right? You don't want to be the person. Chris is our star player. Chris gets a concussion. I don't want to be the one to run to the coach and say, hey, Chris is acting weird, right? How do you overcome that, especially at the younger age groups? I think it's even more difficult.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, we get over that by the coach and the captain saying, no, it's your responsibility, because they can get hurt worse. They could die. You need to look out for your friend because they're in trouble. It's actually built on the bystander intervention model that all your kids are getting on bullying at schools. That it's not the kid who's getting bullied job to fight back. It's your job as a bystander to intervene and try to diffuse the situation and help them. So kids are used to looking out for their friends. They care about their friends. Their social life is their whole thing. So it's actually not hard to anonymously whisper to the coach, check them out.
So I know Kayla's had Ben Utek on her Legacy After the Locker Room podcast, and met him at a concussion conference many years ago. He talked about playing an entire second half of a game with no memory of the game until he got to the film study on Monday, and the coach starts using the laser pointer to point him out when he didn't even think he was on the field. From a coaching and prevention perspective, what are you seeing that's still left to do? I know the protocols are tightening, it is improving, but what next steps can we take at levels like the NFL, the NHL, FIFA to really get that extra prevention that's needed, because those are the role models for all of the other levels of sport?
So with football, it's different for every sport. With football, they just had their State of the Union on Monday, and they keep identifying new things to tackle. So a new piece of data this year was that punts are now the number one cause of concussions in the NFL, not kickoffs. And that's because 2/3 of kickoffs aren't returned because they changed the rules so they wouldn't be, because it's such a dangerous play. So with football, it's just these nuanced small changes that will continue to drive concussion numbers down and hits to the head down. But they've really taken out all the low-hanging fruit. But it's different for every other sport. So ice hockey, we just released another case, Ralph Backstrom, who had CTE, who played six Stanley Cups for the Canadians. And he was never a fighter, and he had it. And that's gotten the attention of active players. We're now 13 for 14 with former NHL players. So that sport, I would argue, now that we're realizing it's a worse issue, the players need to decide what they're comfortable with. And ice hockey at the Olympic level is not ice hockey in the NHL. The NHL is way more hitting, way more fighting, and then you can run. You can just take like 5 extra steps into somebody gets rid of the puck and unload on them if you want to. And is that necessary for the game? If hockey doesn't change the rules, it will continue to cause CTE because they already don't hit in practice. So it's just what happens on the ice. And then they have solid concussion protocols. Although they always need to lower the threshold about when to pull someone and evaluate them. Soccer is a global disaster on concussions. FIFA refuses to change the rules, or whoever the governing bodies are that make the rules, because they always point at each other. You can't pull somebody out, evaluate their concussion, and put it back in. So they give the doctors 3 whole minutes on the field in front of 80,000 people live on TV to figure out if someone has concussion, which is not enough time. Should be a minimum of 10 minutes. You need time to let the symptoms evolve. You need to do tests. And so soccer is an ethical crisis on the concussion issue because they keep leaving people in with concussions, and embarrassingly so. And finally, Europe is waking up to this, and they're starting to fight.
So I have to ask a question when it comes to athlete safety. Roy and I, with Sports Philanthropy Network, we're blessed because we get to talk with the athletes and the wives and the families of people who are dealing with this every day. So I look at guys like Doug Plank, the 46 defense, right? And he's very outspoken about the number of concussions he's had. Like Roy said, Ben Utek, numbers of athletes and their wives. I think one of the things we need to discuss is helmet safety, athlete safety. We talk about companies like Gamebreaker and the changes they're making. What's on the horizon for helmets for military and football and hockey? What are we expecting to see in the next 5 years, Chris?
Yeah, that I don't follow as closely because we all it's human nature to want to believe that the next technology is going to fix this problem, but it's not. Even 10 years ago, the top scientists who test helmets, who created the 5-star system, said, "Look, we're 90% as good as we're ever going to be with known materials because there's only so much you can do with an inch of space in the helmet." It's sort of like saying it's sort of like trying to attack auto safety only focusing on bumpers, right? The bumpers are the smallest part of the issue, right? All your technology now makes you avoid accidents altogether. And that's where we need to focus. So we don't even talk about helmets as an organization. We focus on, here's all the things that the market can't solve, which is stop hitting in practice, change the rules of the game, stop hitting children in the head. We don't need headers in soccer. We don't need kids tackling. So that's where we focus. And I would just argue, if your kid's playing, fine, try to get them the best rated helmet. I trust Virginia Tech. They're good scientists. They're good people. But there is only so much that technology will do for us here.
And Chris, one more question for you. You're an expert in the field. If people want to follow you, they want to learn from you, they want to ask you to speak, they need your help, how can people follow you? What's the best way? Do you use Twitter or what?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, so I do love tweeting. I'm at Chris Nowinski, number 1. But all information is concussionfoundation.org. You can email me, Nowinski@concussionfoundation.org. Let me know what's going on. We got a great team of now 15 people that are fighting to keep your kids safe, fighting to figure out cures for those who are already affected. Really proud of the work. And Roy, I appreciate all the help you've given us over the years. I'm really proud of what the Sports Philanthropy Network has become. So it's really great to be here with you in LA.
So just to verify, I want to make sure that anybody listening to this who's not watching the live stream got that information. Concussionfoundation.org or following Dr. Nowinski on Twitter at Chris Nowinski and the number 1, Chris Nowinski 1. Roy.
Chris, the last issue we want to touch on, you brought up earlier in CTE. kind of the holy grail of figuring out part of this puzzle in terms of how close do you think we are to being able to realistically identify CTE in living individuals?
So the science is advancing so fast. It was only 2 years ago that using brain tissue, we were able to show that the misfolded proteins in your brain with CTE are different than Alzheimer's disease, which has shown us that we need different solutions in Alzheimer's disease for diagnosis. So that was bad news for speed, but it was good news that we're figuring it out. So the quick answer is, if all the research breaks the right way, all the studies we're doing now, in 5 years we could have a diagnosis. But the odds are it may not happen. So it could be 10 years, it could be 15. But the point is, we're working around the clock. We need all the help we can get. We're recruiting current athletes or ex-athletes for a whole bunch of studies. So get on our newsletter at concussionfoundation.org, sign up, and you will, or sign up to pledge your brain or sign up for our research registry and get involved in those studies. We all have a role to play in finding these answers.
One of the hardest conversations I can imagine has to be when you were starting the brain bank and you're reaching out to these families to try to, for lack of a more delicate term, recruit the brain of somebody who's just died, whether by suicide or otherwise. Talk a little bit about how you were able to handle those conversations and get the support of some of those families at the early stage.
Yeah, I remember when I made that first call to the Andre Waters family in 2006, like I asked a whole bunch of doctors to do it instead of me, because I was just the guy who didn't had too much, and they refused, and I was the only one willing to do it. And I credit all the concussions that have dampened my frontal lobe so that I no longer think about my. But I don't know. I just knew it was too important, and I also could put myself in their shoes. And people want to know when they lose a loved one who suffered, why. And so I started making the calls, and thank God the Andre Waters family, Justin Strelzik family, Chris Benoit family, the first three families I worked with were so generous and so kind. And I just kept calling. And luckily, with the help of the media and folks like you, we've been able to raise enough awareness about this that most of the brain donations come in from people calling us now. But I still do make those calls every day because, we need to know, and we need to give scientists the tools and the information so they can develop the cures for us. And brain donation is essential for that.
Well, Chris, we appreciate you coming on the show today. I know you've got a full day of meetings and interviews. I'm glad you took the time to stop by Sports Philanthropy and have this conversation. Very important. I know that there's so many of the organizations in our network that need help in this space, and we look forward to finding more ways to collaborate with Concussion Legacy Foundation. On behalf of Caleb Bradham and myself for Sports Philanthropy Network, we want to thank you for joining us, and to all our viewers and listeners, thank you for taking the time to learn more. I hope you connect with Chris and follow his incredible work and the great team at BU and everything they do in the brain bank as well. For Sports Philanthropy Network and Caleb Bradham, this is Roy Kessel signing off. Please remember to live generously.
Thanks, Roy. Thanks, Caleb.
Hold on, guys. Chris, go ahead and say something. We're frozen.
Oh. What would you like me to say?